honeybees, my name is Raven, this is Eden, that's Jasper, and welcome back to our channel! Subscribe to become part of the hive. Be sure to like and ring the notification bell. Thanks, honeybees! Enjoy the video! Hey friends, welcome back to a new review. I've been away for a couple of weeks, but I've watched a lot of movies during that time. Two of the movies I watched, which I'm really excited to talk about, are Drive Away Dolls and Love Lies Bleeding, which are two similar yet not similar lesbian thriller movies. One is on the comedy side and one is on the more gritty, serious side. So there's a lot of comparisons I can make between the two, and obviously just the common theme of like two separate movies centered around a lesbian couple. I've really appreciated the sort of like lesbian surgence or resurgence, I'm not really sure what to call it, with movies lately because I really enjoyed Bottoms that came out last year. I thought it was really funny, it was really interesting, it was really unique. The dynamic, the friendship dynamic between Ayo Edebiri and Rachel Seno was really good. Two friends who both happen to be lesbians going on their own journeys separately and together. And there's some wild over the top stuff all throughout. It was funny. It was also kind of weird, kind of violent. And I could draw a lot of comparisons between that movie as well as the two that we're going to talk about today. I didn't talk about Bottoms much when it came out, but just know that I really liked it and I thought it was really fun. And I liked Drive Away Dolls even more. And Love Lies Bleeding is a little bit different than those two, but I did like that one as well. So I just want to jump right in to these two movies, starting with Drive Away Dolls. Drive Away Dolls was so fun. It really was a wild ride. I could say that about both these movies, but in different ways for sure. Drive Away Dolls, we'll just get into what it's about and I'll kind of talk about how I felt about it along the way, of course. So Drive Away Dolls stars Geraldine Viswanathan as Marion and Margaret Qualley as Jamie. They're friends, they're both lesbians. Let me just say this right off the bat. This movie is very sexual. It's overtly queer, which I very much appreciated because I feel like we've come a long way with queer cinema. Whereas before, we could kind of imply it. There might be a couple here and there where they actually said gay or lesbian and portrayed certain relationships. Definitely more first with gay men than with queer women, lesbians. So we've come a long way for that reason, but also just simply having these overtly sexual relationships between people of the same gender, and calling it what it is and showing it on screen and being unapologetically that, right? Without something tragic happening to the characters, which there's a few here and there with these movies, but it's not like a bury your gays type of thing where you're allowed to be gay if we kill you at the end or if something terrible happens to you that separates you from your lover kind of situation. These two were gay and we're proud of it and we're happy about it, and weird things happen and bad things happen, but it's not because we're gay, and we can still be in love despite everything that happened. So both these movies have that kind of vibe, which I really loved. Specifically Drive Away Dolls with how like over the top everything was, including like the sexuality and the relationships, but pieces of the story as well. We open with like a classic sort of like thriller opening of a man holding a case and waiting for somebody. It's Pedro Pascal. He's a seller. We don't know what he is. There's a mystery here. What's happening? He gets killed, and we cut to our main characters, which our first introduction to our main character, played by Margaret Qualley, Jamie. She's having sex with a woman, actually cheating on her girlfriend with this woman. So we open with lesbian infidelity. Oh my gosh, it's crazy. It's wild already. What's gonna happen? Where can they go from here? We're starting with such energy, which I love that they just tossed us into it. I'm not a slow burn kind of person when it comes to movies. There's some I can appreciate, but generally I just want things to happen. And one thing about Drive Away Dolls is things are always happening. Jamie cheats on her girlfriend Suki, played by Beanie Feldstein, who I love. Great seeing her in a movie. Great seeing her in another lesbian movie. She was previously in Booksmart, where she did not play a lesbian in Booksmart, but she played a friend to the main lesbian, and so I still consider it a queer film. But anyway, after this happens, Jamie is thrown out by Suki. Jamie and her friend Marion go on a road trip together. Marion's going to Florida. They get a car to go to Florida from a drive-away service, which is where people get to drive cars one way for a certain client that needs a car someplace, which, by the way, this film takes place in 1999, and I love like the 90s vibe. And, if drive-away service were a thing, which I'm sure it was, we don't have it anymore. But it was just fun kind of using something that existed back then as part of the plot. Like, not exactly using the 90s for like nostalgia, but like other things that happened to be in the 90s. And there was a little bit of nostalgia there, but mostly it would just be a movie set in the 90s. I feel like the making this a modern movie wouldn't have made it as good. And also making it a queer story set in the 90s also made it interesting. Just because a movie is queer doesn't mean like there has to be homophobia in it. And I actually really appreciate when there's not. This could just be a story about two women in love, you know? Which is not, but that does happen. Marion and Jamie are on a road trip. They get this car from this drive-away service going to Tallahassee. There's a mix-up, and they end up getting this car that is owned by the criminals who took the case from Pedro Pascal. The case is in the trunk, and along this road trip, Marion, who I loved Geraldine's acting as Marion. Marion and Jamie are two very opposing characters. You kind of wonder how they're even friends. Marion is uptight, professional, likes to read books, would rather read a book than go to a bar, wants to find love, but is too shy, too uptight to do so. Whereas Jamie is out there, completely unapologetically herself, very, very outgoing, very funny, very talkative. And slowly throughout this trip, she brings Marion out of her shell. But Marion also causes Jamie to kind of reflect on herself, and maybe she's being a little bit too crazy sometimes, and that's gotten into the way of what could be meaningful relationships. So the arcs that both the characters go through, as well as the arc that is their relationship, was really fun to watch, very believable. Like I said, their chemistry is amazing. Opposites attract, and I don't see that played well very often, at least in the rom coms I've seen, where it's supposed to be an opposites attract, odd couple kind of situation. I just don't believe that these two people would fall in love. But in this one, I did. So spoilers. I mean, spoilers for both of these. You definitely should have watched these movies before watching this review. If you haven't, I recommend both. But they start as friends, and over the course of this trip end up together. And I really love that that happened. I really wanted that to happen. I just could feel the chemistry. I could feel them bringing the best out of each other. And that was really a credit towards the writing, the directing, and also just the act. But anyway, they find this case in the car, and I never would have guessed what was in the case. Normally, something like this, you'd assume it was like a lot of money or maybe some drugs, but it's not. Basically, these criminals are working with a senator played by Matt Damon to get this case. This case has something that the senator wants that is really important, because if it gets out, it might ruin his reputation and his campaign. So they have to get this case. So these criminals try to find Jamie and Marion along their trip, where they're going to lesbian bars and they're hooking up with soccer players and they're doing all this stuff and kind of falling in love along the way, bringing the best out of each other, like I said. It all comes to a head when we see that what's in the case is a few plaster cast penises. So penises that were made from that were cast from an actual penis. There's like 4 or 5 of them in this case, and one of them is a cast of the senator's penis, and that's why it can't get out. Which we kind of see these dream sequences throughout the movie until we get this reveal of like a hippie woman, hippie imagery. The woman is played by Miley Cyrus, and it's revealed that this woman, when the senator was young, hooked up with him and took a cast of his penis. And the other penises are also very powerful men. So obviously, the senator wants this back, and these sort of henchmen who are chasing Jamie and Marion are the ones that are sent to do it. That's the plot, you know. That's the plot, is that they drive away with these penises, and these two men are after them, and meanwhile they're falling in love at the same time, and using one of the penises as they hook up with each other. So like I said, it's overtly sexual, but in a really fun, over the top but not too much kind of way. It was all just so goofy and really enjoyable. I really had no idea where this story was going to go next. I could not in a million years guess that that's what was in the case and that's what they were after. So the reveal was just so special. It was like I I I probably gasped. I probably screamed right there in the theater, like, ah, that's what's in there. But it was just fun, you know. It was just a lot of fun. When Jamie and Marion get kidnapped by the henchmen after the reveal of what's in the case, the henchmen have their own kind of chemistry, like anti-chemistry throughout this point. They're very stressed. they're on the phone with the chief who's on the side of the senator trying to get this case, and they lose them here and they think they're here, and they interview Jamie's ex-girlfriend Suki to try to find where they are. Meanwhile, Suki's kind of investigating this whole thing because she's in talks with Jamie and Marion, and there's just a lot going on. There's just so much going on, and if you haven't seen it, I'm not gonna like talk about every single thing. You should definitely see it. It's definitely something where there's always something to see on screen. There's always something to laugh at. It's never boring. It never dips. You need those scenes where the action dulls a little bit so it can ramp back up. And it's not like it was action, action, action. But like I said, there's always something happening. There's always pieces to the puzzle coming together, climaxing, so to speak, at different times. So there was never a lull. The girls get kidnapped over this case. The henchmen, their relationship was kind of headed for a buildup of something, and during that scene, one of the henchmen kills the chief and the other henchman, and that was also a shock. Just a lot of twists and turns that really make it a wild ride, right? Like that's why I wrote it here. They're both such a wild ride. And then the conclusion to this, Jamie and Marion decide to blackmail, which blackmail is going to be a theme too between both these movies, blackmail the senator themselves for $1,000,000. Here, you can have your plaster cast penis back. You give us $1,000,000, and it all works out in the end. Well, he does try to kill them, but then Suki comes in and kills the senator. But so it still works out in the end. It does work all out in the end, which I liked. I love that it was a happy ending, and I love that our characters ended up together. Infidelity be damned. Let's forget that Jamie cheated on her girlfriend before this happened. It's fine. It's fine. For the story, I did appreciate that they ended up together and it was happy. Neither one of them died. Neither one of them was gravely injured. They went through some scares, but they were together through all of it. There wasn't like a massive fight that broke them apart. They just grew closer and closer throughout the film, and it was really lovely to watch. And like I said, it's funny. Margaret Qualley specifically, with the southern accent that I don't know how to describe it, the accent that she had going was just inherently hilarious no matter what she was saying. But because she was such like an out there, outgoing character, everything she said was ridiculous. And then opposing that, putting that against Geraldine's portrayal of Marion, a much more calm person, a much more civilized, by the books person. I don't want it anymore.
You said she wouldn't be here.
Suki, I'm just taking my own stuff. That was a gift. I wanted you to have it.
I don't want it, and we're not going to both use it.
Suki, it's your wall dildo.
It's your dildo, Suzanne.
Meshing those two characters together, like I said, the chemistry was amazing. This movie was directed by Ethan Coen, who is one of the Coen brothers, of course, Ethan and Joel Coen, who have made many a movie together. They have also made many a movie apart. And Ethan Coen is the more kind of comedic, whimsical, over-the-top kind of person, whereas Joel Coen is more the gritty, dark, dramatic person. And when they make films together, they have equal parts of both of those things, and they generally make for a good movie. Separately, Joel Coen has no fun in his movies that I've seen. It's all grit. It's all drama. Specifically, what I'm thinking about when I think of a Joel Coen only movie is The Tragedy of Macbeth that came out a couple years ago now, and I absolutely hated it. It was not fun to watch what was on screen. The production design sucked. It was in black and white for seemingly no reason. It was just dialogue straight ripped from the Shakespeare play. There was nothing new or interesting about it, nothing that drew my eye. Absolutely joyless experience, that film. And that's what I think of when I think of Joel Coen on his own. Whereas Ethan Coen makes just super fun, interesting films. I feel like Ethan Coen is fine without Joel. Joel should not be making movies without Ethan. That's just my opinion. You can't change my mind. But yeah, Drive Away Dolls, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. I give this movie a 4.5 out of 5. Okay, next we're going to talk about Love Lies Bleeding. So this is a bit of a turn from Drive Away Dolls. Yes, it's similar in a lot of ways. It's also quite different. It is the more gritty, dark, dramatic version of events, without the suitcase full of dicks, of course. In Love Lies Bleeding, Kristen Stewart plays Lou, who owns a gym frequented by drifter just coming through town Jackie, played by Katie M. O'Brien. Jackie is a bodybuilder, kind of on her way through town, headed to Vegas for this bodybuilding competition, and she meets Lou, like I said, at the gym. Before this, our introduction to Jackie is that she's hooking up with this man, JJ, played by Dave Franco, in order to get a job at a gun range. And it's all these characters are connected. JJ is actually Lou's brother-in-law. JJ is married to Lou's sister Beth, played by Jenna Malone. Jenna Malone's been in a lot of stuff. The only movie of hers I can name besides this is Saved, which is a very good movie. Highly recommend it. But anyway, the gun range that JJ works at is owned by Lou's father, Lou Sr. I don't want to keep having to say Lou Sr. and Lou, so I'm just going to call Lou Kristen Stewart, and everybody else gets to be their character's name. Jackie hooks up with JJ to get a job at this gun range. After she gets a job at the gun range, she meets Kristen Stewart at the gym that she works at. Kristen Stewart gets her on steroids the night that they meet, which leads up to a lot of problems throughout the movie. We're kind of seeing Jackie slowly kind of like lose her mind, get into these hallucinations, get into these rage fits, roid rage, you might call it, which adds a lot to the tension throughout the film because we never know what Jackie's gonna do. Obviously, she's very strong. She shows that she wants to defend herself and she's not afraid of anything. So she slowly and slowly gets a little more dangerous and out of her mind throughout the film. But that's not the main problem. That's just part of it. There's a lot happening here. It's also a wild ride, but in a very like anxiety inducing way where I was kind of always like scared for all of the characters throughout the whole time. Again, hopefully you've watched this before seeing this review. If you haven't, watch it. I am going to spoil it a little bit though. Pretty early after they meet, Jackie and Kristen Stewart hook up. Not quite as explicit as like the sex scenes in Drive Away Dolls. At least they didn't go on for as long as those scenes, but still very explicit, which I definitely still appreciated. I think this is a very interesting drama to have a lesbian romance. It's definitely a gritty, dark crime thriller that's also a romance. So, you know, a romantic thriller, which there's been plenty of those, but I can't think of one where the central couple are lesbians. So I thought it was a really interesting kind of genre to put all of this in. Something new, and I love something new. Also, just like the previous film, it's not modern day. It takes place in 1989, and I love the aesthetic of it. You could definitely tell it was 1989. The gym clothes, the way it was shot, the location looked very 80s. And it worked really well. Again, it was not played for nostalgia, which I appreciated. There's been so many 80s nostalgia, even some 90s nostalgia of recently, but this one wasn't about that. It just happened to be in the 80s and it really worked. This story specifically really worked for the 80s. These characters were very much 80s, and I don't think it would have worked the same way at all if it was modern day. So these characters are all connected, right? Jackie and Kristen Stewart, they're hooking up, they start dating. Jackie is asked to stay with Kristen. She's kind of using people, but innocently. She's just trying to get by, you know, and she's doing it in the only way that she can at this moment. She doesn't have a lot of money. She doesn't really have anything to offer except for her body. So she hooks up with JJ to get the job. When she meets Kristen Stewart, she hooks up with her, stays at her place. But then actually they catch feelings for each other, and it's very sweet seeing it go on for a while until we get to not just one boiling point, but a few. JJ abuses his wife, Kristen's sister Beth, and every time we see Beth, she's got a black eye, or she's got a bruise, or her arm's in a sling. Something's happening. He's very obviously abusing her, and it gets to a point where Beth is in the hospital, and her whole face, at least the whole half of her face, is swollen and bruised. Her eye is like bruised shut. It's terrible. This, of course, very much upsets Kristen. She mentions to Jackie that she really wishes that JJ was dead. So Jackie, being on steroids and not thinking straight and letting her anger overtake her, brutally murders JJ. Smashes his face in. It's brutal. Like I said, it's violent. It's a lot, but it was definitely shocking because it was the most brutal thing we had seen at that point, and I was just waiting for that to happen. There had to be some sort of breaking point, and the breaking was of JJ's face, and it was a gasp moment. And it was a very welcomed gasp moment. This is one of those movies that uses shock, but in a way that works. It builds up to it, and it's exactly what we needed. You know, if it wasn't shocking, it wouldn't have worked. It would have fizzled out. And there's a few points from that scene on, there's a few points like that where it really builds the tension and we get that bam. It just happens. And I appreciate it because I didn't really know where it was going. I figured JJ was going to get murdered. I figured the whole movie was going to be of Jackie and Kristen plotting to kill him, but it happens a scene later. It just happens one scene after Beth is in the hospital. So then the movie becomes we gotta hide JJ's body and deal with all these consequences from killing JJ, which was also unexpected, but I loved the twist and turn there, where I would have thought, oh, this is gonna be a slow build to one murder. Nope, multiple murders, starting with that one. Kristen finds out she has to clean up the murder, which is interesting seeing the process of how she did that. It's obvious that she has done something like that before, and we find out she did. She drives the body to this ravine and sends it in his car over the cliff and sets it on fire. And then, of course, there's repercussions from that. The body is found because they can see the smoke. Kristen knows this. We're like, how does she know this? Turns out her father, Lou Sr., who owns the gun range, is a criminal. And she has helped him kill a lot of opposing businessmen in the past and dump them over this ravine. But she knew that when the police found JJ's body from seeing the smoke from the car on fire, they would find all the other bodies down there. And that was her way of taking care of it and blaming her father and getting him caught by the FBI. But unfortunately, it doesn't really work that well. Her father finds out, tries to target Kristen, sending a cop to kill her. She ends up killing that cop. There's this woman who's been obsessed with Kristen kind of throughout the film. Her name is Daisy. Daisy's very jealous when Kristen starts dating Jackie, and Daisy was actually a witness to Jackie and Kristen driving JJ's body. So Daisy uses that information to kind of blackmail Kristen into hooking up with her. And there was so much tension in that scene, and I really appreciated them building up the kind of relationship slash non-relationship between Daisy and Kristen because she was so uninterested, and it was set up so well. But meanwhile, while this is happening, while Daisy and Kristen are having a very intense meeting, Jackie's roid hallucinations and everything is getting worse, and she ends up hitchhiking to Vegas to get to her bodybuilding competition. While she's on stage, we get this kind of like hallucination sequence that's all built up to the worst it's ever been. She ends up throwing up on stage and beating another contestant, which lands her in jail. Lou Sr. bails Jackie out, convinces her to kill Daisy, which is also a very shocking scene because she does. I was not expecting that to happen. I don't know why I wasn't expecting Daisy to die, but how it happened was just so quick and shocking in a different way. Like, it wasn't overtly violent. She just gets shot in the back of the head. It just really took me by surprise. That's another thing that I could say about both these movies today is they very much took me by surprise. There's very much unexpected events and portrayals of events that I really appreciated. I've said it a million times. I love a unique film. I love a movie where I can't guess the twists and turns. So then Kristen has another body to clean up, and that's when the whole confrontation between her and the cop that her father sends to kill her happens, and she kills the cop. And then we get this kind of final confrontation between Kristen Stewart and her father. There's also some flashbacks throughout the film that Kristen is having of like her father hurting, maybe killing someone, maybe she's a part of it, we don't know. And it comes to a head where we see that she helped him kill these opposing businessmen and hide their bodies. We didn't know for sure that that's what happened until this point. She did not want to be a part of it anymore, but now, unfortunately, she is again. During this confrontation with her father, Jackie is there, and then we get this weird kind of sci-fi body horror scene where she turns into a giant. It's not the first sort of body horror sequence in the film. There's a few sequences throughout where when Jackie is working out or after she takes steroids, we can kind of hear and see bits of her muscle growing, and her kind of reacting to it, kind of like a werewolf sequence, but we see it bit by bit. And then during this final confrontation, we see it all together, her whole body, all her muscles kind of growing, and she's transforming into this giant woman who holds Lou Sr. down, saving Kristen Stewart. Kristen decides not to kill him and leave him for the police because the FBI has also been looking for him throughout this whole film. We get another happy ending, pseudo happy ending, because our two characters, Jackie and Kristen, decide to stay together after the ups and downs throughout the events of the film. And they drive off together. And it ends in one more tiny little shocking bit where Daisy, who is still in the back of Kristen Stewart's truck as her and Jackie are driving away, actually isn't dead. Kristen pulls over, strangles her, and leaves her on the side of the road. And that's the end of the movie, which I thought it was a fitting end. I liked it, and ending with another little bit of shock there, which I really appreciated. A little comedic shock release in a weird way, in a very darkly comedic way. But we still get that happy romance ending. I'd like to assume that they drive off together and start a new life together. And the sequences of romance throughout the film between the two characters I thought were very nice. It wasn't overdone. It balanced well with the crime thriller aspect of the film, which I think if you're gonna be a multi-genre movie, which this definitely was, it should be equal parts or blended well, and this was definitely blended well. It was at all times a romance and a thriller and a crime film. But yeah, that's the events of Love Lies Bleeding. Another thing I really liked about this film, it kind of blurs reality in a way, specifically with that sequence at the end with Jackie becoming this giant woman who saves the day. And then there actually is a happy ending. It's not like a reveal that that was fake and they're actually dead or anything like that, which you might expect from something like that's kind of like a sci fi fantasy moment. Like, oh, actually, it was a dream, it wasn't real. Especially since we had seen different hallucination sequences throughout the film in bits and pieces. Maybe this is another one of those, but it probably was, and maybe it was just her in a roid rage. Maybe it was just actually her because she was very strong. She is a bodybuilder. Actually, her coming and holding him down. It was just portrayed as her being a giant woman because that's how she felt at that moment. Maybe that's how she looked in the eyes of Kristen Stewart at that moment. This savior, this big, strong person coming to save the day, and that's what she was, you know. So who knows what really happened during that scene? I also appreciated that they didn't show us what really happened. We can assume that her becoming a giant didn't happen. But like I said, that's just maybe how the characters felt in that moment. It wasn't all based in reality. We're seeing what the characters see, but maybe they're not the most reliable of narrators. So, both of these films that I talked about today, very interesting character dynamics, very unique character motivations, personalities, where we didn't need to know much about their history, just enough for the story to make sense. Which means they were written well. Really great writing in both of these films. Great writing, great direction, great acting, good chemistry, good use of violence in both. They both used violence very well in a way that worked, that wasn't, like I said, wasn't too much, despite both movies being over the top in different ways. A good way for both of them, in a funny way and a more realistic, gritty way for the most part. Love Lies Bleeding, I give 4 out of 5 stars. That's all I have to say about both of these movies. Drive Away Dolls and Love Lies Bleeding. Obviously, I really liked both. I thought both were very fun. I mean, I wouldn't say Love Lies Bleeding is fun, but because I was definitely anxious for a lot of it, but it was a good watch. It was an interesting watch if you're in that kind of mood. And then Drive Away Dolls was just super funny. Let me know what you guys thought about these movies, what other movies that you're excited to see coming out. There's definitely so many that I'm excited to see. I feel like it's ramping up to be a really good year for movies so far. So like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Thanks for watching, honeybees. Make sure to like and subscribe. Bye. Meow.